Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. I'm Dan Stilgo, Marketing Manager at Blend, and joined by Phil Vallander, Co-founder at Blend again, which is nice, by the way. Nice to have you back in the studio. Yeah. I've done a few solo episodes recently, which has been fun, but it's never quite the same, connection, bouncing off of somebody else. So, yeah,
good to be here.
Good to have you back. And this was, an episode that was put in the calendar pretty short notice because I saw this LinkedIn post from you, Phil, and I was like, "Oh, that's a very interesting topic that I'd love to dive a bit deeper into." And it's all about Apple's App Store ads and how they work, why they are such a great thing to understand and for marketers to want to learn and kind of involve themselves in to improve B2B ads more holistically.
Not to use the ads platform because most of us won't have a need for that, but their certification in particular is a really, I think, valuable resource for B2B marketers when it comes to PPC as a broader topic. I posted that every B2B marketer should become Apple Ads certified because the learnings in their search ads certification are so counterintuitive, refreshing, but valuable ultimately. It really struck me and wanted to share that with our listeners.
This podcast is brought to you by Blend. We're a B2B website and demand generation agency. We work with ambitious businesses just like yours to create and execute effective demand generation strategies that drive pipeline for your business. We also recognize that your website is the most important asset you have in marketing. So we specialize in building scalable websites on HubSpot that convert the demand that you've created. If you want to find out more about our services and see real results that we've generated for businesses, visit blendb2b.com. Yeah, I'd love to rewind a bit and unpack why you were even looking at Apple ads in the first place. And, share some of that insight and that journey.
Pretty simple. I mean, naturally, most of my time is spent thinking about B2B marketing, like you.
Standard.
And so nothing's changed in that regard. But on the side, I developed a couple of iOS apps to scratch an itch that I had personally. I wanted certain apps to exist and they didn't. I wanted to try my hand at coding again after 20 years of not doing it. AI had come out and really did make it a lot faster to code. And so I built and launched 3 apps over a couple of years, and I've just started to look at how I could potentially market those apps more effectively, more widely, in order to better understand their various monetization strategies and so on and stuff. So I was just thinking, how do I promote an app? And you can have a website and you can use content and SEO. You can post on Reddit and try and tap into communities and so on. But of course, sooner or later, it's only natural. I thought, well, I better look at the App Store ads platform. Knew it existed. Never thought about trying to understand it previously. Didn't think it would have any, I didn't consciously think or realize that it would have any bearing or application in the B2B world because it's a B2C platform for the most part, and certainly in the way it's built. So just on that journey, I just thought, well, rather than sort of muddle my way through, why not take their course? We've all done it with Google. Most of us have done it at some point in our career anyway, and some with LinkedIn too, I'm sure. So I thought, no, let's take the Apple Search Ad certification and see whether I can use ads cost effectively, economically, to drive downloads of my apps. And it was just really, really interesting as I started to go through the modules in the course and take in what they were advising and recommending, just how different it was from the traditional playbook of PPC in B2B. So I thought it was worth sharing.
Yeah, well, I think we should unpack that and, dig into some of those differences and the learnings from it because, we've spoken before this and it is really interesting. So you say about taking the course, right? I'm assuming you took the course that Apple Ads supply?
Exactly. It's a fairly traditional experience where you You read a load of stuff, you answer a few questions along the way, and then you take a little exam at the end to see whether you've absorbed it or onboarded it, which is not challenging, right? Not hard. You could fake it if you wanted to. But of course, I, like you, have spent many, many years looking quite frustratedly at B2B PPC campaigns, conventional thinking, wisdom, advice about it. I can't think of a time in my career when I've come across an established PPC campaign for a B2B organization and I've not thought that economically it was terrible, and
That's true, yeah.
And that it was just a huge waste of money for that organization, and that it fundamentally didn't work the way it was being applied. My own efforts to get it to work for Blend prior to your joining, but also after, really quite frustrating. It's not a silver bullet solution, despite so much praise being heaped on it, so much focus being poured into it, so much budget being spent on it. So in that context, having spent so long being frustrated and over time learning that the secret to, or the key to success in B2B was in essentially doing the opposite of most of the advised, recommended, expert given advice and consultancy, it was really, really interesting, and it therefore has a lot of application in this space.
Yeah. So what are the primary differences between advertising on something like Google, which we mentioned? There are a lot of frustrations when it comes to Google ads, like hyper focus on the wrong metrics a lot of the time, too worried about our click-through rates, the amount of clicks we get, and not actually focused on what is truly converting at the bottom of the funnel. And Apple ads, which take a different approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think my conclusion is that it's all rooted in the different incentives that Apple and other PPC vendors, the most obvious being Google, the different incentives and that they have for users of their platform, and essentially where their revenues come from and how they're monetized. So Apple owns the whole platform, owns the whole experience. The device the user is searching on, the device the user is installing apps on, the app store that they're purchasing in. For the most part, there's some evolution in that space as well, but they own that whole space, not just the part of it where the ad is served to that user. They quite famously take a pretty large cut of any download that has a cost associated to it, or any subscription that's provided through their store. 30%, I think, is the average, which is hearty.
Yeah.
But because they are rewarded when a user who sees an ad clicks, installs, enjoys, and remains as a customer over a long period, because they're rewarded both financially and in terms of the ecosystem value, when that occurs, and not only when the click on the ad occurs, they're able to take a very different view of what matters. They're able to give advice that prioritizes the user experience, the benefit that they get from seeing ads, from seeing adverts, the value that exists in showing users the right ads that lead to successful conversions that meet their needs.
Yeah.
Because at the end of that chain of events, Apple can theoretically get quite a significant financial reward. So while they do charge for clicks on their ads, it's not the only way they make money. Of course, in the case of Google Ads, and Google Ads have got plenty of good applications and lots of revenue has been generated through Google Ads, but Google's revenue in that ad system, in that ad structure, only comes from the clicks.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think it's only natural that their outlook is different.
Yeah. It makes total sense at the end of the day. Apple can incentivize themselves based on conversions and downloads because they're in total control of the entire operating system.
And it's that part which is so aligned or alike to what the B2B organization that's using PPC is optimizing for. We, like Apple, need to optimize our use of PPC for high intent conversions that go on to become pipeline, that do buy at the end of the day and do get success out of the purchase and become valuable lifetime customers of our businesses. We are, for the most part, within SMEs and scale-ups especially, we need ROI. We need money that we spend on marketing to produce more in revenue than we spend on it. So we need to optimize, like Apple, around that end result, not like Google around the number of clicks or impressions that our ads generate.
Yeah.
So it's really, really clear there why this approach, this certificate, this education is a fit for what B2B is trying to get out of PPC.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was kind of wondering if where you were going is that Google need to be more like Apple in the way that they incentivize themselves. But actually what you're saying is, no, as businesses, we need to think more like Apple when it comes to B2B PPC and not like Google in terms of what really matters the most.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's advice for B2B marketers who should take this course immediately, if in my opinion. I think agencies that serve B2Bs should also take a leaf out of this approach, because if you generate revenue for your customer, a measurable, like visible, tangible revenue, that's a far better place to be in than having an account for 12 months and then churning because while you optimized quality score, and maybe CPC, they saw nothing out of it. So I think those two cohorts can get immense value. I don't expect Google to change their approach. And again, Google serves B2C and B2B. This is advice that's applicable without a doubt in B2B, but may not translate the same way in B2C markets. I don't make that assumption necessarily. And as I said earlier on, just over the years of working out, well, if PPC applied the way the textbooks tell us to doesn't work, what are the counterintuitive, less obvious approaches? And they all tend to be, go in the opposite direction to what we've been told in terms of targeting, focus, spend, etc., etc. And just as I was going through this course with Apple, I was like seeing again and again, like, wow, this is so opposed to what most people are encouraged to do with their PPC campaigns. This is so the opposite of what we're told is the key to success. Like, how can they do this? How can they talk themselves out of so much money ultimately? But again, when you remember what the value is for them in terms of a user experience, I do think that knowing Apple as an organization, I think there's huge emphasis on that. They don't want ads in their ecosystem to just piss people off. So they've encouraged everybody to use them, not just ethically, but like courteously, conscientiously, around mutual success. And that's a great mantra to take into B2B.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to dig a little bit deeper into some of the nuances around like targeting and, I don't know, audience selection. How is there differences in how you target keywords and how you actually get your ads in front of people, or is that fairly similar?
A lot of the mechanisms are very similar. You pick your campaigns where you've got geographic targeting, some demographic targeting, form your ad groups where you've got collections of keywords with different match types, set your budgets. There's a lot of similarities between the platforms. And I think that's because there are a lot of similarities between the platforms, which is we're trying to pay to put ads at the top of search results. Now, Apple has a few other sort of placement options, so like, this is very much an analogy with search engine PPC. Apple also has a kind of like display ad type mechanism stuff, but we're talking about search ads here. So the mechanisms are similar. There'll be a lot of familiar concepts there, which is another great thing because it's very transferable knowledge. But it's the sort of what you do and why that differs. And I'm not going to give it all away because I'm going to let people go and take the course. But some of the standout things. And the primary one was basically around campaign structure and strategy. So, as opposed to sort of my experience in B2B PPC, where there isn't a lot of standardized advice around what ad groups and campaigns to create in the first place. Apple are very prescriptive about what you should start with at the very least. And essentially, it's two things. One is a small group of hyper-targeted, and I mean like really hyper-targeted, exact match only ad groups.
Interesting.
One would be around your category. So like, what does your app do?
Yeah.
And who does it do it for? So in my case, I've got an app that is around packing for your travels, for your holidays. So my category is travel packing. And in there, you want to put keywords that users would use when they're searching for an app specifically to do what you do. And so you're not stretching out trying to find people that might have an interest in what you're talking about despite not even searching for it. You're really putting in a small number of exact match only keywords that target your category specifically.
Yeah. And is that something that Apple are encouraging or forcing you to do? For example, like in that example, could you target travel?
You totally could. They won't. Their system doesn't prevent that. But by the time you finish their certificate, you've had this hammered home. Like, they make no bones about it. That's dumb. This is smart.
Yeah.
You know, if a user is searching for a travel packing app in this instance, and they see an ad for a travel packing app, and it's got features, and it's got a UI, and it's got a price point, and it's, you know, that fits with that, there's a likelihood they'll tap that app, which is when Apple gets paid for its click. And there's a high likelihood, based on all their data, that a percentage of those people who tap will download it. So this is great for you and for Apple. So category. The other one is going to be competitors, actually. Now, this is a sort of interesting area in B2B too. And I think you can argue, well, I'm interested in your current outlook on it, but for better or worse, you'll tell me, Apple advised that one of the three exact match keyword campaigns that you have is competitors. Because if you can be seen when people are searching for apps that compete with you, again, very, very high likelihood within the B2C app environment, which, let's face it, is pretty small beans, right? You know, you can get high conversion on that ad. Now, I hesitate to recommend that as a strategy because I don't necessarily, I need to think about whether it is. And again, I'm looking to you to help me there. But ultimately, I can't disagree with the fact that it's a route to get high conversions in the context that the App Store represents. Bidding on competitors, is that something we like in B2B at the moment?
I think there are cases where it can work, cases where it can't work, which is, that's a classic marketing response,
Yes,
isn't it?
But no,
it depends. I think in cases where you've got a commodity product, which is very common in B2C, it works very well because it's a like for like a lot of the time when it comes to products.
Impulse, I'll try that one.
Instead of that one. But most B2B purchases are more considered and require a lot more in-depth research and analysis, where like buyer decisions and preferences and affinity for brands are created over much longer time frames before you even get to a search ad. And in that case, you need to be more considered, where you're less likely to reach for a competitor if you already like recognize some brand names and you've already done a bit of research beforehand. I haven't seen it work as well. There are commodity style products where I think it can work similarly to B2C, but for considered more complex B2B purchases, I think it's less likely to be effective.
The parallel to B2B here is most definitely in keyword targeting. Exact match only for the most part. You don't want to be serving your ads and spending money coming up in adjacent but ultimately different search results. And so the category, high intent keywords, if you want to get revenue results out of B2B PPC, then in most cases the strategy is to get like narrow and focus on buyers who are in market looking for your specific type of solution, right? So that's where the big parallel is. The category campaign, the exact match keyword strategy. And ultimately bidding advice is around like maximizing the likelihood that you'll get clicks and downloads. You know, there's no real rocket science that's different to the playbooks that B2B marketers are seeing. But it's like set your bids to maximize the chance that you'll get that click, get that download, not be seen ultimately. Third and final exact match keyword campaign is brand, actually. And it's an interesting one because, of course, in B2B, we see a lot of the success of PPC coming from brand, and you don't really need to do that in order to get that traffic. So I think that's a counterpoint. But across all of that, the thing they hammer home again and again and again is that you don't need broad match, even though their platform supports it. You don't even need phrase match to get the majority of the potential revenue that exists for you out of the ecosystem. And that, I think, is a sensible observation to take into B2B.
Interesting. Do they give any advice around the ad creative, headline copy, anything like that?
Yeah, well, that's interesting, actually. We're jumping ahead here, but so I want to come back to something else. But on the subject of creative, it's not something they explore in great depth or detail. But I think there is an implied philosophy there, which is to say, the ad platform that Apple's built allows you to come up with campaign-specific creative, allows you to come up with variations of your ad, but for the most part, they assume that you're going to send people to your standard App Store listing.
Right.
Which I think sends a message about the fact that if your product does what it says it does, is well described, positioned, designed, then that should be good enough to convert. Interesting, right?
Well, I suppose when it comes to B2B, and like I'm thinking Google here, you have things like ad score, where sometimes you're forced to change pages and create unique destinations to improve an ad score in order to even, have your ad served in the feed.
Yeah.
Sounds like Apple didn't
see anything like that. I mean, I don't recall seeing anything like that while I was going through it, but I certainly noticed that they're educating you on how to build a successful ad campaign, and they made no objection around using your standard App Store listing as your target, as your destination. Yes, you can come up with variations. Yes, you can localize. Yes, you can do custom creative. But at no point did they make out that was necessary, required, or important. And I just think that there's a little bit of like philosophical implication there, which is buyers know what they want, and if you show it them, then you have a very good chance. And if you're trying to twist their arm through creative, you're probably missing something somewhere else, right? Because twisting buyers' arms doesn't usually lead to great results for both parties at the end of the day. So, yeah, I thought that was a takeaway that maybe I'd inferred as opposed to being explicit. But I think it's a good advice that if you get people to your website and your website does a good job of explaining what your product's offering, does, then you should be able to attract a pretty high intent conversion rate.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm thinking about it now, these classic PPC landing pages come with their faults, because a typical B2B buyer journey isn't that I will Google this one thing, I will click on this ad, and I will convert straight away. The journey is much longer, much more complex than that. They are highly likely to visit the rest of your website and explore it there.
Yep.
So, I mean, that page really should only be used if you need that ad score, like to help you with that.
I think they're part of the playbook, which is not optimized for B2B, which is when your ad campaigns are massively broad match, you're getting loads and loads of impressions, you're trying to get visits from all over the place for all different types of terms, bringing people to a landing page where you are putting every ounce of effort you can into converting every visitor you can into a lead. It's just optimized for the wrong thing, isn't it? It's not optimized around like quality of the experience. It's not optimized around mutual success. It's really optimized around justifying the spend on PPC to some extent. And we've watched companies do it over and over again, B2B specifically, where, especially in mid, I mean, if you're spending massive budgets, then maybe this is different. But like for the most part, landing page optimization, it might improve conversion rate, but will it improve pipeline generation? I don't know. We've seen people struggle because that part of the journey is not at fault. It's the part where you acquire the impressions and the traffic in the first place that's at fault. And I mean, ultimately, if you have a hyper-focused exact match keyword campaign that generates only high quality in terms of fit and need, visits to your website, maybe it doesn't matter so much what page they arrive at, but maybe then you could actually drive significant results through landing page optimization. But for whatever reason, Apple didn't seem to care that I was driving clicks on ads through to my standard creative with no effort spent to optimize it.
It's funny again, isn't it? Because on this podcast, we circle round things, but always end back at measurement.
Quite.
Because again, we haven't
you measuring, yeah.
we haven't said measurement here, but this all comes back to measurement at the end of the day, because Google Ads is enticing you to measure clicks, impressions, the things that aren't truly driving like conversions into pipeline and revenue. Apple Ads are making you think about those things and optimize around those things.
Yeah. So in Apple's platform, you will see impressions, you will see clicks, but everything they teach you is about maximizing the download ultimately, which is in your best interest. And as a B2B, that's what we need to optimize for, and it's in their best interest. I wanted to loop back to like campaign strategy, because there is still a concept that's akin to using broad match, which of course where we've seen businesses waste
blow huge
heaps
budgets
of money. Now Apple too does have an approach for what they call search discovery, I think, if I remember correctly. But even though it was basically saying create an ad group where you use our broad match keyword discovery algorithm, where you let us, choose which keywords to show you for. Even that was delivered in a way that I felt was more ethical in terms of the B2B like outcome that we're trying to seek. And it was basically this. It says, right, okay, have one campaign which is broad match, essentially. I think their algorithm is slightly different, but broad match, and we're going to call it keyword discovery. And the objective of it is to find out if there are other keywords that when you're seen for can drive positive results or not.
Okay.
Two things that I think differ from either the typical teaching that goes on, or maybe not the teaching but the application, is one, every other keyword that you've used across all exact match campaigns are negative keywords in that campaign.
Right.
So there's never any like cannibalization, duplication, or waste in terms of, you're targeting a keyword there and there and there with this creative and that creative and that creative, which I think is smart. And I've seen that mistake made, although I don't think it's necessarily baked into like the wisdom, but it happens. And then what I also thought was really interesting, and I don't know if it's revelationary or not, is that the minute that you see a keyword in that campaign performing, their recommendation, and I mean, it almost feels stronger than a recommendation, is put it as a negative keyword in that campaign and put it in your exact match campaign straight away, as soon as you think there's potential there.
Yeah.
So that now you are targeting that keyword specifically because you see potential, and you're never going to waste money going after it in a broad match context again. And I just felt like that was a really good way to have the ability to discover new keywords, but control spend around it and not waste money spamming keywords with ads, without measuring it and acting upon that measurement in a way that controls your spend and maximizes your output. And so, there's that campaign structure. I just thought again and again and again, wow, this is basically a B2B playbook that I could get behind.
Yeah. Whereas
everything I've seen that comes out of the industry lacks that focus, and as a result, most campaigns in B2B, I think I would be comfortable saying most campaigns generate crap results in terms of return on investment and are a waste of marketing budget for the majority of the organizations that do it.
Yeah, most. I would say, definitely not all. There are businesses out there having big success with PPC, but it's a minority, not the majority. And that the point you made around using phrase match and then moving those to exact match, I have seen used in B2B. The trouble that people face is that phrase match in Google now is more like broad match,
Right.
because they have something called close variance on exact match keywords,
Yeah.
which I'm assuming Apple don't have. So basically, if I was to run an ad for what was it, packing, travel packing, then Google might serve a close variant of travel packing items or something like that, like some sort of variant. They think, oh, okay, that's kind of relevant. I'm assuming Apple might restrict that, and exact match is exact match. It is what you get.
Yeah, exactly. I believe so.
Which is a plus, for the platform. Not much you can take away from that, I don't think, from a B2B sense, because you are limited by what the platform gives you in that essence. But I think actually the one thing to take away is, make sure within your B2B campaigns, like Google, Microsoft mainly, the exact match keywords that you have in there are truly the ones you want in there, and the close variants that get thrown up are excluded, added as negative keywords as soon as possible if they're not relevant to you. Keep hyper focused on what truly matters and what's really going to be relevant to you in order to convert the best leads.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so if we sort of look back, when you think about the typical B2B PPC campaign that you've come across, what have been the mistakes that people have been making, and how is this certificate going against what we see implemented so often? We've talked before about the wastage that PPC is, and like you said, there is success out there, but most businesses can get the same success from a much lower budget on PPC, or actually pivot from unsuccessful to successful if they optimize their PPC campaign around their benefit, not around in-platform metrics, right? Mm-hmm. Broadly speaking, that is the issue that we see most often, I think.
Measurement. Again, it does come back to measurement. I think, like you say, so many marketers and people running PPC are focused on the wrong things, trying to optimize their campaigns for the wrong things, like click-through rate, for example. Even if, I was thinking about this the other day, actually, looking at LinkedIn ads rather than Google ads, because we turned all those off. And actually, I'm not that bothered about click-through rate, because if click-through rate is 0.1%, but there's been 10 conversions on a single ad, that's great,
Okay.
Well, in the context of things. Whereas if click-through rate is 0.5% on another ad with 0 conversions, then...
So what you're saying is that a high click-through rate on its own is worthless.
Yeah, because...
if it doesn't drive the next step and the next step after that so that you can see an ROI.
Because the important thing is that you are attracting the right buyer. 0.1% click-through rate might seem bad as a metric, but who are those 0.1%?
Yeah.
Are they the ones truly resonating with your message and are going to convert at a high percentage into pipeline and revenue?
Yeah.
If so, that's all that matters.
Right. Would that then be reason to try to iterate on that and improve that conversion rate, as opposed to the conversion rate itself being the success metric, right? It would be, okay. Another thing that I think is just probably not a conscious sort of thing, but within the Apple ecosystem that we're talking about, there's only one call to action available to you as an advertiser. That's download the app, right? I can't put an ebook there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I can't put a blog post on the end of a paid search ad, which is sort of effectively, although not intentionally, I'm sure, totally aligned to what B2B ultimately needs to optimize around. And that's another classic budget waster that I've seen over the years, which is PPC campaigns driving top of the funnel traffic, content download leads, stuff that's up here to go into the nurturing machine, the lead scoring machine, never to be seen again down at the pipeline, right? Whereas in the Apple store, all you can do is say, you like my app? Download my app. And then you get that vote. No, I'm off. Or yes, I will. But either way, when people take that action, I get value.
Yeah. The word that I've got written down here is intent. And I think Apple kind of at an advantage with this, because if you visit the App Store,
Yes.
your intent is to download an app.
Yes.
If you Google something, well,
Could have a range of intents.
the intent can scale from anything to I've never heard of this topic before to I am ready to buy something right now. However, within your keyword strategy and what you're targeting, you can narrow down that intent and get closer to what Apple are doing
Yeah.
with finding the highest intent possible to get you closer to the conversion as possible.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was really, like fitting, I suppose. Just
Yeah.
like, oh wow, yet again, this just translate and if you look holistically at it, including things you don't have a choice or control over, there's just so much to take away and apply to B2B. So if you're a marketer in B2B that wants, to generate like great success for your company with PPC, or understand why it doesn't work or why it does work to the extent it doesn't work, like take this course, right? Just the learnings that this course offers, I think will be a light bulb moment for lots of people, either confirming what they already know or suspect, or totally lifting the lid on like why PPC is such a frustrating medium in most cases. And I think marketers who challenge the status quo, like think critically about how they're spending their organization's money, they can go on to have fantastic careers, because they are the ones that will be seen to be producing like business outcomes, business KPIs, driving revenue, spending budget well, making a difference, as opposed to the ones that report on CPC, impressions, quality score, page speed, and stuff that's important, has a place and is nice, but isn't what a business is, ultimately there to generate. So it's a way to, I think, level up and maybe like revolutionize the way your company deploys its PPC budget, which can create budget for other things. You can take a lot of money out of PPC in some situations, generate the same or better results. In fact, we've seen that happen in client campaigns. Better results from less money, lower budget.
More focused,
And suddenly you've got money to spend on LinkedIn or to buy equipment like this for your podcast, whatever you want to do, whatever your audience insights tells you is the thing to try next. So it's win-win, I think. And it's really good thing for B2B marketers to do.
Cool. All right. Any other points you want to cover, or should we wrap it up there?
I think that's it.
Cool. All right. Nice one. Well, by the way, I wanted to say as well, if you've made it to the end of this episode, which more and more people are doing lately, which is great, be great if you could drop us a follow or like a little review or something. That would be really nice, because we've actually seen, more and more people following us recently, but not as many reviews. So yeah, just dip into the whatever player you're using right now, drop us a follow, drop us a review, would be really nice. Give us some motivation to do more of these for sure. Yeah. And yeah, that'd be great. But we will catch you next time. And thanks for tuning in. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all.